In heaven, everything is.
As with many of David Lynch's movies, the events seen in Eraserhead can be interpreted on many different levels. There is a literal level, a symbolic level, and many, many more. However, no matter which way you look at this movie, it still begs to be interpreted. There isn't a definitive answer. Some of the symbolism in the movie is pretty clear, but most of it is really up to the viewer to pick apart, apply their own personal experiences to it, and find the meaning in the movie. David Lynch spoke about this, calling it his most spiritual movie he has ever made, and said that no matter what interpretation you as the viewer comes up with is right, because this movie is supposed to be viewed as a dream, and everyone is going to interpret their dreams in a unique way. So what's the purpose of this video? The reason that I'm creating this isn't to try and change your interpretation, but instead to look at what Lynch does to make everybody who watches the movie have a unique interpretation and is a subjective outlook on the film. This is true with all my film dissections, but with this movie in particular, it's very important to have seen the movie before watching this video. So if you have not seen Eraserhead, by all means, make sure you check it out. Eraserhead is a movie about anxiety and how the troubles of life are reflected in our subconscious. The events that we see on screen aren't necessarily supposed to be taken literally, but instead a reflection of the real world that we never actually see. This interpretation really explains a lot. It explains why the twisted world that we see looks so bizarre, because it's not real. To Henry, in the real world, the idea of having a child could ruin his life, so what he sees in his nightmare is the embodiment of pure disgust. In fact, almost everything in the movie that we see is the embodiment of something else. The woman across the hall embodies lust, the woman in the radiator is the embodiment of the seduction of death, as she tries to offer Henry the way out, telling him that
In heaven, everything is fine.
Mary's family embodies abnormality and discomfort. To Henry, the idea of living with a child means discomfort, and that is what he sees when he spends time with Mary's family. In the middle of his nightmare, he has a vision in which he sees his own head fall off, he sees his child's head replace his own, and watches his head slowly be turned into erasers for pencils. That vision that he embodies has quite a few different ideas. First, it shows the physical toll that raising a child can have. Obviously, this is exaggerated, but again, this isn't literal, but instead the manifestation of what the tolls could be. In addition, it shows his desire for the situation to change. He would love to be able to erase his mistake. Of course, that is impossible. No matter what he does, he is trapped in this nightmare. We never are told that we are watching a nightmare. We are never told that we are not seeing the real world. So how can we ensure that we are watching one? Well, there are 5 techniques that I want to discuss in this video that David Lynch uses to capture a nightmare on film. First and foremost is the sound that we hear in the background. Upon its release, and still to this day, this film is heralded for the fantastic sound mixing and sound editing. From beginning to end, this film sounds horrifying. There is a constant background sound, one that is almost indescribable and shouldn't exist naturally. This cues the audience in and tells us that the world that we are looking at is unnatural. Speaking of feeling unnatural, everything in this world feels funny. There are things scattered throughout the entire film. In this scene, when Henry steps in the puddle of water, we would expect to hear a splash, but instead we don't. We just hear the same howling wind that we have always heard. When Henry is talking with Mary's family, he tells them that he is on vacation, yet this does not look like a world which you would want to vacation. We also see plants stuck in dirt without flower pots. This entire movie is scattered with things that don't exist in the real world. It's scattered with things that tell us we are in a fictitious world made for us to feel uncomfortable. There are also some things that simply do not exist in our real world, things that are symbolic. I've already mentioned this, but everything that we see is the embodiment of something else. We aren't seeing the real world, but instead we're seeing what a real world looks like when you're in a nightmare. Next, the way the film flows resembles that of a dream or a nightmare. When it starts, it seems to be unusual, without a doubt, but there's still a chance that what we are seeing could exist in reality. However, as the film progresses, it slowly loses all sense of reality and morphs into a surreal world that we have to watch. This progression follows the same flow of dreams. Often when dreams start, they appear to be real. But as dreams progress, they often turn surreal, losing all sense of reality, just like this film. Finally, a lot of what is shown in this movie is shown rather than told, just like nightmares. We are the observers. It is impossible for us to do anything about it. We just have to sit back and watch what is happening, all the while having no control over what is going to happen next. This, of course, is by no means the last time Lynch incorporated dreams into his films. However, in his later works involving the subconscious, there seem to be moments which clearly take place in the real world, and clearly take place in the nightmare one. However, in Eraserhead, we are presented with only one reality, and our reality has one of two choices. To either live in this nightmare which is going to beat you down emotionally and take everything from you, or you can end your life. Henry chose the latter. He chose to exit this nightmare world and enter a world where everything is fine. Thank you very much for watching. David Lynch is one of the greatest directors of all time. Eraserhead was the first of his films that I was introduced to, and ever since I saw it, it has always fascinated me, and I couldn't be happier with discussing it here. Next week we are going to be wrapping up our discussion of Horror Month with a much more recent title, It Follows. That video is going to be out next Saturday. There's a link to that on the right of the screen. On the left of the screen is my last video, where we took a look at Psycho and the soundtrack and how the soundtrack helps tell the story. Very happy with how that video turned out, so if you haven't seen it, make sure you check it out. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next week.